I have recently, just by luck in the email across some of these social networks, had about a dozen people very sincerely send me repeated email messages or social network messages asking, they are seriously thinking about moving to Asia, some part of Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, China, because they think it's, part of the future of the world economy, and they want to be positioned there. They want to know what it's like. And, um, and then I sort of, I told them nice, bland stuff, well balanced and all that. And these 12 people rejected that, and they didn't believe me. And they said, it sounds like you're, being well balanced and fair minded. And we really don't need that. We really need a really rather ruthless, realistic, discouraging, and accurate portrait of the landscape we will have to learn to thrive on. What's the negative part of the Asian landscape that they don't tell you about, that they hide, that all the brochures leave out, and that makes it just tough to tolerate and to hang around there for a long time? Now, I've been in Asia for 23 years, and twice, 45 years ago, and more recently, the last 15 years. So I know a good bit about that. And I've worked in Singapore, I've worked in Korea, I've very serious work in Korea, tripling the village income of Jeju. Uh, Worked in China, very seriously in China recently, and then in Japan very seriously, twice. So here are my observations, some Asian conundrums, which constitute the negative landscape that you'll run into almost everywhere in Asia. And the Asians will deny all of this, so no Asian will honestly admit this. I've never found any Asian honestly willing to admit these things exist, but they're in the newspaper every single week, and they're in all the academic research books about Asian culture. So people will deny it. They won't mention it. It's on none of the brochures. They will, if you ask them, they'll deny it, but they're lying. It's there. Either they're lying or they're stupid, because it's there. And they're there in almost every Asian country. At the moment that I'm doing this, I'm unaware of any Asian country that lacks these. So here are 5 or 6 of these Asian conundrums. They constitute the negative landscape for getting things done, which, if you're not familiar with Asia, can really discourage you. And this is stuff that never is not there, and that never doesn't appear. It's always appearing, and it's there everywhere, and you always have to deal with it every day. One conundrum is, come here and help us improve our world rank 100 levels. But you must follow our 1,100-year-old list of 2.5 meters of documented rules. So help us change, but make sure you follow our 1,100-year-old pile of 2.5 meters of rules. And it's just amazing. The Asians are absolutely unaware of what a joke this is. If you were at all serious about moving up in world rank, the very first thing you would do is take 2 meters of those 2.5 meters of rules and throw them in the trash. And if you were so gutless and dishonest that you were unwilling to let go of those 2 meters of rules, then there's nothing on this earth that's going to move your rank up into 100 ranks into world global levels. So, that's a fake deal. If you are unwilling to throw away your 2 meters of your rules, then forget about asking us to go help you move up in rank, because nothing you do is going to move you up in rank, and nothing anybody outside is going to do is going to move you up in rank. A subspecies of this is we want our faculty to be more international, but none of our faculty are going to be foreigners. So we're going to have an international faculty, none of whose core members are foreigners. Only in Asia. And to be fair, Hong Kong has recently overcome this. And so now they have faculty that a third or 50% are actually from countries outside of China, and people not of Chinese background. And you have to give Hong Kong credit for that. But still, most of Asia, it's still this sort of join and make our faculty more foreign. But all the core decisions are controlled by us local guys. And the foreigners have absolutely no power. They're just decoration to sell to students. Number 2. Join our Asian conundrum number 2. Join our innovative company and wait 45 or 50 years before anyone is willing to listen to your ideas, just before retirement. you are old enough that they may listen to some of your initiatives and your proposals and your ideas. But if you're 40 years old or 45 years old or 50 years, you are way too young to be listened to. And we don't need initiatives from you. We just need you to execute what the senior people have decided on. So we want an innovative company where you keep quiet for the first 45 years of your career and then you speak up, 2 years before you retire. And you'd be amazed at how prevalent this is in Asia. And they're unaware of what a joke it is. I mean, they think these are not in contradiction to each other. It's incredible. Number 3, they have 2 basic management systems in Asia. And they are almost the same. They're like 2 faces of the same thing. And I don't have a good English word for it. It's very complicated. One of them is management by bullying. And this is everywhere in Asia, management by bullying. And basically, top management mobilizes local or middle management to bully you with social pressure to do what the dictatorship wants. And in the West, you have actual dictators. This self-important, overly male guy who's telling everybody all the time how great he is and then commanding everyone to do the obvious, like Captain Kirk on the Star Trek TV series in America, which Asians laugh at because it's such a dictatorial, pompous little male. If that's what American bosses and fathers are like, no wonder they have trouble competing with Asia. So, the actual dictator, Asia doesn't have an actual dictator. Asia has bullying as the dictator, where management mobilizes social opinion at various parts of the company to bully you into doing what everybody else is doing. And it's quite effective. You got 20 people around you saying, well, why don't you go drinking with us? Well, I don't want to. Well, you have to go. It shows disrespect not to go drinking with us. And why don't you stay late with us? Well, don't know why. I've already finished my role. No, it shows disrespect for the manager. He's working late. You have to stay with us, work late too. So management by bullying is a big part of it. It starts in elementary school. Many, many Asian school systems have teachers who do not correct the answers or the behavior of individual students for years, 10 years. Instead, they have these little lunchroom groups of 4 or 5 students who eat lunch together. And the teacher will go to that group of 4 and say, your group did this bad behavior that in reality one of them did. But the teacher doesn't say that. The teacher says your group, mismanaged itself so that one of your members has broken some law or regulation or done some bad thing. And you guys are going to be punished unless you get this thing straightened out. So you straighten out this behavioral problem of your group. So you get punished for whatever the 4 guys in your little group did wrong. And this goes on for decades. And it creates, so the Japanese and the Koreans and the Chinese are always amazed to surprised that they have bullying in their schools. The whole system is based on bullying. Now they have another system, and I think it's the same system, just another face to it, which is management by friendliness. And you don't have to read books. You don't have to think conceptually. You don't have to reach agreements that are articulated. Instead, you reach agreements that are not articulated, kind of mystical agreements, which means everybody gets to interpret it the way they want. And then what do you do to make all this work? You drink together. And I've had hundreds of people in Asia for over the 23 years I've been here. I've had people literally in classes at Osaka Furitsu University and at Seoul National University. People, 40-year-old managers tell me, how do you solve this problem? Oh, eat and drink together. And how do you solve this totally different problem? Eat and drink together. How 10 years ago did you solve this other problem? Eat and drink together. And how 10 years from now are you going to solve this IT problem? Eat and drink together. Being friendly is the ultimate solution. They have actually 3 of them. Bullying, being friendly, and close personally and emotionally. What was that third one I was going to do? And then make an effort. Try hard. Bullying, friendliness, and try hard. And, it sounds cute, and it's very, there's this gentleness aesthetic in most Asian cultures that comes from Confucius. His Li virtue, his Li virtue of benevolence and between people, and that a father-son relation with just command and without benevolence is nothing, and benevolence is always 2 ways, etc., etc. And it's very nice because that's totally missing in the West. There's no benevolence in social relations in the West at all. They're rather ugly and barbaric. So I really like that. However, it gets really tiring in a hurry. And friendliness will create 1,000, 10,000 people in a corporation like Sharp that commit suicide together. That literally are so friendly to each other that they just nobody does anything the company needs for 20 years at a stretch. And so you end up with all the problems solved by friendliness until actually somebody realizes 10 years down the road that friendliness didn't actually solve any of their problems. It just masked it by bribing people with beer and emotional closeness to not complain. And that actually nothing got solved during that 10 years. And now you've got accumulation of 10 years of that crap. So management by bullying, management by friendliness. And the third one is management by trying really, really hard, really make an effort. I like this because in the West it's talent, which is left over from snobby aristocrats who said that they had the talent, that's why they're aristocrats. And, that was a circular argument. And so I think, the talent theory, and, in American psychology for 100 years, they never researched effort in American psychology departments. For 100 years, you couldn't publish a paper anywhere in American psychology on effort as a way to do something. Only talent. It's amazing. Go look at the Psychology Review, the top journal in the field in America, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It wasn't until Erickson and Simon got this professional practice theory of expertise finally published in Psychology Review about 10 years ago that they had their first published article on effort as opposed to talent, which is somehow in the genes because I come from better bloodline than you. So I like the Asian emphasis on effort. However, unthinking effort is what cost them wars, huge lost wars for China, for Korea, for Japan. They have these ridiculous military commanders where the average soldier worked really, really hard and made tremendous effort, but his leadership was so stupid that it ended up killing everybody and nobody got anywhere. The leadership doesn't read books, doesn't think. They solve other problems with friendliness and bullying. And then you low-level guys, you try hard even though the directions we're giving you are ignorant because we don't read any books. So that's all over Asia. And you're going to run into it everywhere, and you might as well get demoralized by it now because it's been around here for 1,000 years. It's not going to go away next year. Number 4. You have a lot of R&D in Asia that's for show R&D. I call it marketing R&D. To look like we're developing knowledge in front of the customer so the customer thinks we're not behind the times. Now, if the customer read books, they would know that you are copying old American research. And I don't want to mention names, but the most famous industrial research lab in Japan and the most famous industrial research lab in Korea and the second most famous industrial research lab in China consistently over the last 10 years have copied Xerox Palo Alto research projects 3 months after they're published in America. And their local Asian customers don't read books and therefore don't know that this has already been published. And they go into these show and dance seminars and, oh, look at their advanced research. They are copying someone else's project. They are not doing the hard work of inventing the directions of the future. And they don't study enough in college for that. And even if they tried to study in college, their professors would just ask them to memorize crap, which is what the Asian elites do. So this is fake tatemai or whatever, for show research all over Asia. And you get tired of it. And they pretend that it's real research. And you've read it, and it's 3 months after Xerox PARC does something. And they'll never admit it. And it's the top places. It's not the second places. It's the whole system. Number 5. They have what they call higher education in Asia, which is, it's all no education. First of all, there's no education in Asia anywhere. Certainly not in Singapore. Certainly not in China. Certainly not in Korea. Certainly not in Japan. Nowhere I've been in Asia is there any education at all. There is zero education anywhere in Asia. In fact, Asian governments as a cultural whole hate education and are against it in principle. It's a principle of their cultures that education is bad and evil and should be stomped out. They have lots of schooling. And what they do is they take schooling from 3-year-olds, school them to get into elite elementary schools, and then they school them from elite elementary schools to get into elite middle schools. And they school them in middle schools to get into elite high schools. And they school them in high schools to get into elite colleges. And then they school them in colleges to get into elite companies. It's all schooling, no training for the most part. And no teaching for the most part. And no educating at all. And in fact, education's formally forbidden by the guidelines the government's put out. So you end up with evil people, which is people of high ability and no education, which is what the formal definition of evil, if you read Anna Arendt's book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. And you end up with higher education that is not higher, it's just childhood types of memorization carried over. So the national elites of all these Asian countries are like 6-year-olds with 40-year-old bodies. And they know everything and can't think. That's what you get from, 2 decades of memorization. And it's all over Asia. It's been there for 1,000 years. I think the Chinese started it or something like that. Maybe Mongolia started it. But it's still there. It's everywhere. And therefore you end up faculty who don't read, students who don't read, students who don't do serious homework. They do easy homework, but they don't do any serious homework. And faculty who don't do research publishing except in a kind of for show sense. And then you have all these fake conferences all over Asia, which they make just so they can have conferences with each other where they peer review and agree to publish all their own research that they can't publish in other global peer review formats. So you end up with this sort of higher education that's not higher, it's just older versions of childhood treatment. Schooling, but no educating going on. That's 5 of them, and that's probably enough for this video because I'm already at 17 minutes. And, you've got to understand this is a very unfair, one-sided video. I'm trying to respond to people who told me that they wanted to hear the negative story, the negative landscape that nobody tells anybody about. So these 5 things that I've mentioned are not any one country in Asia. They're every country in Asia I've visited, with 1 or 2 exceptions. And they're not getting weaker as flaws. There's no progress along these 5 dimensions. These 5 dimensions are probably as strong 1,000 years ago as they are now, and my guess is they're going to be about as strong 1,000 years from now as they are now. And there's something deep-rooted about them which, we don't want progress, wealth, success, and influence and high rank if it requires us to let go of this part of our nature. And I sympathize with it because in many ways, underneath each of these 5 negative landscapes in all Asian countries are some virtues that, when you compare them to the Western way, really look virtuous. And you get kinds of power, although very limited kinds of power. You get 22-year-olds new to an Asian company who work their guts out 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, no private life, no sex life, no enthusiasm, no ability to plan their own career. It's the way religious groups control people. You just work them flat out so hard that they can't think. They're too tired on Sunday to do anything except collapse. And this is how you control people in these religious cults. And to see 100,000 employees of major Asian corporations in every country in Asia using this to control their employees, it's unpleasant. I think it's unfair to the youth, and I wouldn't do it. But, it's been going on for 1,000 years here. It's probably going to be here 1,000 years from now. Now, the Asians look at that and they say, this is extended life. This is a totally committed life. This is an Asian virtue. And the Americans look at that and they say, this is an Egyptian slave building the pyramids with a whip over it. The whip is bullying and drinking beer together and try hard, the 3 characteristics of Asian management. So, there are virtues here. There's the gentleness dynamic of drinking together. And it does get young salesmen in Asian firms who are much more productive as salesmen and better connected to their customers than American salesmen are. Because they have this gentleness dynamic of drinking with their bosses, who really do make a sincere effort to give everything they know about the customers to the young guys. And then they drink with the customers, and even the senior customers will tell these young salesmen how to sell better. And so you really do have this gentleness dynamic that has some advantages completely missing in the West. I did sales in Japan for many years, sales in Korea, and sales in China, and I did sales in America. And there's no comparison. The sales in China, Japan, and Korea is better because of this benevolence from Confucius dynamic of gentleness. Does create harder working young people enslaved. Now, the problem is that those guys, it takes them 45 years before they're qualified in their Asian company to make the kind of proposals on new things that I could make anytime I wanted at Xerox or EDS or Coopers and Lybrand. So the permeability to new ideas of Western companies from anybody at any age and any function is just absolutely nothing remotely like it in an Asian organization. I mean, nothing within 100 million miles of it. So yes, there's some good stuff that the West doesn't have, but boy, there's a huge pile of crap, and it is not getting better, not getting better at all. And so if you come to Asia, you 12 people who called me, you're going to have to deal with these 5 weaknesses, and I don't think they're going away. I've seen no evidence in 45 years of any weakening of these particular weaknesses at all. I think they are extremely deeply rooted. I don't know enough Asian history, even though I've studied a lot more Japanese history than the average Japanese has in graduate school. But I don't know enough Asian history to know exactly where these things come from. I do know a lot of Japanese management came from the fact that in Muromachi, Japan, the Rinzai-zen monasteries grew more rice per hectare than the emperor's lands did, even though the emperor had better lands. And that management accomplishment caused the Rinzai-zen monastic forms of management to be spread all over Japan. I do know this is very similar to the Benedictines form of management in Spain, where each person worked for their own food, spread all over Christian Europe to replace the Roman aristocrat with slaves form of growing food. But it never matched the Roman form of productivity. It was 1,100 years before they matched Roman levels of agricultural productivity. So that didn't work in Europe. The Rinzai-zen thing really was productive, and so I think they probably were more productive for that 1,000 years in Asia than the West was. And then Needham's work and Siven's book on Chinese innovations up until about 1300 was in evidence that they were more productive and had more time from agricultural surplus to invest in innovation.